Oh man, sorry.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it looks like we're at 2 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome everyone to the August Accounts Receivable Core Committee. My name is Gerald Floyd. I'm the Statewide Accounts Receivable Management Coordinator here at DAS. So glad everyone could join us today. Excuse me, as I go back and forth, I'm actually in the conference room, so I'm only have one screen available today. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth here to try and keep the agenda on the screen and making sure that people are admitted to the lobby, or from the lobby, I should say. So first off, wanted to let everyone know that the FY23 Accounts Receivable Honor Roll key dates are posted online, and that is here at the Swarm website. AR Honor Roll criteria is under the quick links on the right-hand side. And it now has the FY23 key dates. No major changes. There's a couple things that will be updated in the future as we get the information from the folks in SFMA as far as the close dates for month 13. They hadn't quite finalized those yet, so but I wanted to get this posted for everyone. Let's see. One thing we wanted to point out, this is one of those years where, because October 1 falls on a Sunday, you'll notice that there's the deadline for the LFO submission is October 1, and then the date for submitting the remainder of the reports is October 2nd. That is because the October 1 date is set in statute in ORS 293229. So we do not have the ability to say that you can make your submission after October 1. But we do have that latitude with the items that are from the OAM, for example. So it really is kind of all still the same, but there is a little bit of a distinction there in between October 1 and October 2 for next year. So that is now available for you, again, on the Swarm website under the quick links for the AR Honor Roll criteria. Does anybody have any questions about the FY23 Honor Roll or any of the dates that we may have there?
Gerald, this is Heidi. There were two on there. One was the training is available sometime in August, which is a requirement. And then will the website to enter be open on October 2nd?
The website, the LFO website?
Yes.
That is completely up to LFO because it technically is an October 1 deadline. Historically, they do not actually close the reporting website until we tell them that everybody that we're working with, you know, sometimes people are making correcting entries based on our reviews, that type of thing. So I would suspect that it will still be open by the 2nd, but you know, for the official answer, you need to have it entered by October 1 because that is what is in the statute. So, but the site should still be open because I would suspect that, you know, most years we still at least have a few days that we're working with folks that, you know, we find something and they've got to make some correcting entries. So that's pretty normal for that operation.
Okay. What about the training?
The training, I would suspect, is going to be very much the same as what we've done this year. You know, we eventually will want to get back to having our in-person training. When exactly that will be, you know, I think is anyone's guess. You know, as folks are getting back into hybrid approaches with their office participation. Some of that may also be that we would do a training, even if it's virtual, but we would set that date. So it'd be kind of like this meeting, but we would do it as a training format. But you know, we'll figure out what that'll be come this time next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on the honor roll key dates? Okay. Next on the agenda, kind of getting ready for this year's year-end reporting. Wanted to kind of just do a follow-up to the email that had gone out a couple weeks ago when the website was opened, and the reports that are due by October 1, since October 1 is not a weekend at this point, or for this year, excuse me. So you have, for those that are subject to the ARPM reporting, you have your fiscal year 22 quarter 4 and the annual measures. Those are due, as well as the LFO reporting entries. The website is now open. Speaking of the key dates, the target date to have your entries completed is 9/16. That doesn't mean that if you make it after that date, you lose the honor roll. It just basically is a time frame that we establish to make sure that if you have it in by that point and you notify us, we have sufficient time in which we can do our review for data quality and so forth. And that way, if we find anything, you have time to make the correcting entries by the October 1 deadline. So that's why we ask for the entries to be in by 9/16. You know, if you make it in after that, we will certainly do our best to still complete the review. But, you know, if you submit it on, you know, the afternoon of the 30th, that leaves us very little time in which to actually get that review done. And if we find something, that we would actually be able to get back to you and have you make those corrections before the October 1 deadline. Doesn't mean that you can't still make a correction after that. Like I said, we will work with LFO on keeping that open until those corrections are in, because we do want the data to be correct. But if that correction is occurring after October 1, it can impact whether or not you actually get the honor roll for that year. And so if it is because you submitted it very late in the process, that can impact whether or not the honor roll is awarded for that year. So that's why we ask for about the 9/16 period. So don't panic if you can't meet 9/16, but certainly the earlier you can submit, then it just makes it easier for us to get those reviews done, you know, when everybody's kind of doing it all at the same time. You know, it may take us a little bit of time to get to your particular agency to review the data and ask any questions that may come up. So on the From the Swarm website, the accounts receivable resources, L&D, there's your reporting system link to go to the LFO portal. Got the training, the LFO reporting manual, and then the agency checklist. I do need to admit that I did make a mistake on this agenda that I sent out. I'd actually started it a couple weeks ago. And so I created this link, and you'll notice that here the hyperlink says it's a checklist 2021 final. The checklist didn't change, but to kind of avoid confusion, we updated the link so that it removed the 2021 reference. So this is now actually a broken link from the agenda that I sent, but it is on this page. This link right here under the L&D resources, it's the agency year-end checklist. So I didn't change anything on the checklist, but I was renaming it, and therefore, if you use the agenda to try and get to it, you will notice that the link is broken, and it has to do with the name. You can get to it from the Swarm site under the accounts receivable resources, agency year-end checklist. That is due by October 1, along with your certification on your written off, abated, and canceled debts. That is actually part of the OAM. And so it's under the OAM 75, this annual certification. And I wanted to bring this up because I've had a couple of folks that are a little bit confused when they are filling this out. This third box that is canceled by Department of Revenue, some folks think of that as when DOR OAA is sending accounts back to an agency that, you know, maybe it's the RWO status that, you know, or that gets canceled back. That is not what this particular box is asking for. The canceled by DOR under us 305, chapter 305 of the ORS is essentially an income tax statute. So it is specific to accounts that are owed to DOR for tax purposes, of which they have the ability to cancel under that particular statute. So only the Department of Revenue should be the only agency that is completing that box. Everything that you would do is either going to be, for example, if you send an account to DOR OAA and it gets sent back or is an RWO status, that is a written off under 293240. Or if it was abated, meaning waived, settled, or otherwise determined not to be owed, you would report it in the second box. If you are not the Department of Revenue, do not fill in this box right here. Any questions on that? Not hearing any. So that is the link from the OAM. That link should work from the agenda because that name did not change.
Can I jump in real quick,
Yeah.
Gerald? Could everybody please turn off their mic if they're not in the process of speaking? Many thanks.
Thank you. So next, after they're written off and canceled debt certification, this is an optional, this is not a requirement for the honor roll, but the LFO reporting worksheet. This is a format by where it is designed to assist agencies with pulling their information by fund type as to how it's going to get entered into the LFO website. So if you use it, we ask that go ahead and send it to us, and that way as we're doing our verification, you know, we can look and see if perhaps there was a transposition in a number somewhere. We might be able to find that. So it's just another piece of the information that we can use to look at all the different pieces of data between the various reports and do that data quality check to meet the criteria that DAS has under the statute, which is to improve the data quality of which gets reported to LFO. So that is the worksheet. Most of you have used it in the past when you have accounts to report, but it is not a requirement to submit, but we do ask that if you use it, certainly go ahead and send it to us. And we will use that as part of our review. Lastly, and this is not tied to the October 1 date, but as you are preparing your LFO entries, if you have, as an agency, a total ending balance between all your different fund types that you report of 50 million or more, then you are required under OS 293-229 sub 2 to submit an additional report to the legislature by December 31st. That statute details what type of information needs to go in there. It's basically a summary of what's the nature of the types of debts that you're collecting and what are you doing to collect on them. What are your strategies for lowering L&D accounts going forward, that type of thing. Usually is a very small number of account agencies that are subject to that report, but just wanted to make sure and put a reminder here that as you're pulling this information, that you keep in mind that you will have an additional report due to the legislature if that balance is more than 50 million. That goes to, we typically suggest sending it to your LFO agency analyst. You can copy swarm. And if for some reason it doesn't get to the right person at LFO, we have it, and the person that we work with when they're producing their report, we can assist them on gathering that information based on the copy to us. You are not required to send it to us, but we do kind of try and keep track. If an agency needs to submit the report, we will help send reminders to you until we know that it has been submitted. So any questions on fiscal year end reporting? Any of the requirements for what is due by October 1? Anybody having any issues so far? Or has anybody even gotten started yet? I know that Friday was just the month 13 close, so some folks probably haven't even started pulling their information yet, but anybody have any questions about year-end reporting for AR? Gone. Okay. Next up on the agenda, had a few agencies ask some questions on this, and so I wanted to add it to the agenda today just to share so that kind of everybody's hearing the same message. When an account is at Department of Revenue, other agency accounts, and the status is put into RWO, that status can fluctuate. It can become RWO, the agency can evaluate it, they can, look at the criteria for in the OAM for write-off, they can write it off. Any new piece of information that DOR gets, if they are going to receive a payment, for example, they need to put it back into an active status to post that payment. The new piece of data may be that somebody got a job and the employment report comes in. To reactivate the collection cycle, they need to remove it from the RWO status. The removal of the RWO status does not immediately mean that you need to reinstitute that AR on your books. What it does mean is if you get a payment on an account that you have previously written off, that is the point at which you would reinstitute the AR, post the payment, and then at that point, you kind of need to potentially reach out to Department of Revenue and find out what was the source of that payment. If it was, for example, a tax offset that might have been a one-time deal because of the kicker, for example, that may not mean that there's going to be future payments. So you can then reevaluate whether or not the balance of that account should be written off or not. The RWO status fluctuates, and one of the key components for AR reporting is we do not expect we look at the data and we get some information from DOR about balances and collections and so forth. We do a reasonableness check. We don't expect your Section 3A balance of your LFO report to have the exact same ending balance that DOR does for non-RWO accounts, because those RWOs can come and go. There's timing differences between when accounts are submitted to DOR versus when they might be removed. Payments, for example, that come in June to DOR are going to get reported, but they're remitted to the agency in July. So we don't expect those balances to be the same. But just be aware that an RWO status change does mean that you'll want to look at that, especially if it's associated with a corresponding payment. What is the source of that payment? And then how to reestablish that AR, post the payment, and then reevaluate the account from there as to whether or not that balance should remain on your books because DOR has something that they're actively going after. For example, if somebody is now employed and they're able to garnish a wage, for example, there can be future payments that would come in. Not guaranteed, but those are definitely some things that you want to look at with that RWO status change. So just because an account, you've written it off and DOR changes that status right before June 30th does not mean that we expect you to reactivate that AR and report it as an addition for that year. Only if the payment that came in would go along with the reestablishment of that account. So I know that there have been lots of questions in the past around balances with DOR. Most of that has to do with, we look at that reasonableness check. If you say you've got $5,000 at DOR and they say they've got 500,000, that's probably not a timing issue. So that's where we would pose that question of how did you get to your balance when DOR says they've got so much more. That's a very exaggerated example, but that is the type of evaluation that we do when we're looking at that data and saying how reasonable is this. But we do understand that there is timing differences and the RWO is going to continue to fluctuate those balances that we get from DOR versus what you're reporting on LFO. So still may mean we ask a question, and it's very important for you to have known when you look at that inventory report how that RWO status may impact the types of questions that we ask. And it's not that we're suggesting that you need to change your number per se, but the variance is significant enough that we would ask the question, have you looked at that? So just wanted to use that as an example to have the conversation about what those RWO status changes will mean, and give you an opportunity to ask any questions about what you should do in certain situations, and we can talk through those and so forth. So does anybody have any questions about processing? Brad?
Hi, Gerald. Yes, Bradford from the PUC. So my question is that if it's a one-time payment, is it okay just to go in and reduce the allowance for bad debt that's on the books if we know that it's only going to be a one-time payment?
There is within the OAM, get to that page here, because this has come up. I believe it's under 15. Of course, now that you asked that question, I've lost my point of where this goes, but I want to say it's revenues and receivables. There is a specific portion of the OAM where it talks about that you reset up the account and then you would make your adjustment to then at that point the allowance. can you net it against the allowance? That's a question that you probably would want to ask your SARS analyst as to what's the most appropriate way to make that type of transaction if it's a known one-time transaction versus, say, resetting up $1,000 debt, posting a $100 payment, and then rewriting off the balance of $900. I'm just not as versed in the accounting side of the requirements that your SARS analyst can help you with.
Okay, thank you.
And when I send out the minutes, I will definitely look for that reference in, I can't remember if it's chapter 10 or chapter 15, but I will find that reference and include it in the minutes. Anybody else have any questions on RWO status, write-offs, etc.?
Gerald, so if I understand this correctly, DOR can put an account that was written off back into the active status. Then when I'm reviewing my monthly reports, I could have that account that has been put back into active status is going to show on the monthly report. When I'm matching that up against what I show, it's going to be off because I'm going to show that written off.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
And the point there is just knowing, why does DOR make those status changes? It has to do with information that they have. It cannot be in an RWO status and, for example, them issue a garnishment. It's got to be in an active status. So it's partially has to do with how their system operates to take a specific action. So it has to do with that. It's not a, hey, we think this is now collectible. It may still very well be in the same spot, but to send that letter or send that garnishment or whatever the case may be is to, based on what information they got, or even posting the, my understanding is even just posting a tax offset. It has to come out back into the active status. They post the payment, then can potentially put it right back into RWO status. But that the timing and the report generation, you may see that movement back and forth. And I wanted to just make it clear that just because it comes out of the RWO status does not mean you have to set it back up. I will find the reference that says when you do need to set it back up, and it's typically associated with you're posting now a payment. And so that is more of a system thing related to that RWO than, oh, I need to put this back on my book so that I balance to DOR. The balancing is, yes, I know that they still have it. I know what I've done with it. Okay, I can move on. It's not like some new account that you didn't have referenced, or, you had an account as being active and suddenly it's no longer on the inventory report at all. That would definitely be the type of reconciliation you'd want to find out what happened to the account. But in this case, that fluctuation does not mean you have to necessarily take an action.
And then, so it is mandatory by the OM that if I receive a payment on that, I have to set up an AR. I can't just record that payment, that ACH that came through from DOR. I can't just post that with a T code 190. I have to set up the AR.
My understanding is that is correct, because then from there, the evaluation of whether or not the balance of that account will be collectible will impact ultimately then the calculation for the allowance at the end of the year, those types of things. And I'll probably better be able to answer that question in the minutes when I find the reference to the part of the OAM that refers to the reestablishment of that AR. It's probably a little confusing because I don't have it handy at the moment, but there is a specific point at which, especially when you're posting a payment, that you reestablish the debt.
Okay, so I'll watch for the minutes and see what you found out.
I apologize for not having that handy. Probably should have, but anyways, I don't have it off the top of my head at the moment. So, but there is a specific part of the OAM that I'll include in the minutes. Anybody have any other questions on RWO processing, write-offs, et cetera? Okay. Next on the agenda, as we're preparing for LFO data, if your agency has accounts that are owed to it that are related to a criminal restitution case that would have gone through judicial, do not include those in your agency LFO report. The reason for that is because they are an account that went through OJD. OJD will be reporting that account. We don't want to duplicate the total balance owed to the state. Your agency, upon OJD being successful in collecting on that restitution, and they send you that money, you know, you still have a certain accounting for that. But as far as LFO is concerned, that is a judicial debt, not owed to your agency. However, if the case was a civil judgment that included restitution, that is not an account that is being collected by OJD, those you do include in your agency LFO report. So it's only the criminal restitutions that you would exclude. So any questions on that? I'm not seeing any hands up. And that hasn't changed, but I did want to just put out the reminder again. I know that we've got new folks that have come on board and might not have been around for previous reporting cycles. So I just wanted to make sure and bring that up as a point of clarification. Moving on in the agenda, DOR OAA update. They have informed me that they have brought on a new collection firm, Integral Recoveries. It was one of the vendors from the last solicitation that was done. This is a replacement of a vendor that did not renew their contract with the state, and so therefore they were down to 2 vendors, and so this is a replacement to bring back the third. But that vendor has been onboarded and kind of got all the stuff worked through with their file structures and so forth. And as of, I believe, this month, DOR will begin sending assignments to that new collection firm. So nothing really that you as an agency need to do, but you know, just to be aware. I know sometimes debtors will, you know, get notifications either from DOR or from the vendor when they get outsourced, and they'll end up calling you, the agency, and wanted you to at least be aware that that was the name of the vendor that Department of Revenue does use. So it wouldn't be a surprise if you happen to get that type of a phone call. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving right along, kind of zipping through the agenda here today. Wanted to ask that, I know that the deadline is come and gone for agencies to submit legislative concepts. If your agency has submitted anything that kind of has an impact on the accounts receivable process, even if it's just for your agency, if you could send me a copy of the LC, or at the point you get a draft bill, perhaps, just let me know. And one of the things that we tend to do here at Swarm is we'll monitor progress of bills during a legislative session. So kind of just having that heads up that you've got something out there that has been proposed. We'll kind of keep track of that. And as we get into the session next year, During our ARC meetings, we'll give updates on where certain bills are in the process and how they're moving through the legislative process. So if your agency has anything, we just ask that you go ahead and let us know, and hopefully send us a copy of the LC or the draft bill, either way. And that'll help us to monitor those in next year's session. Anybody have anything that they know has been put forth that they want to share with the group as something that you're working on? Or maybe everybody's been so busy with fiscal year end they haven't been too worried about it, or maybe nobody's proposed anything. I don't know. Either way, send it to the swarm@das.oregon.gov, and we would appreciate any heads up that you can give us. With that, we'll open it up for a roundtable. If anybody has any topic that they want to discuss or a question that they want to ask, and we'll be happy to bring that up and either chat about it here, or we'll do the research offline and bring it back to the next meeting. Nobody? Nothing? The one thing I would like to at least bring up for a point of conversation, I'm going to be out on vacation in October, so we will not have a meeting then. Wanted to ask the question of, we've been meeting on even numbered months. Would it be valuable, because the next meeting would have scheduled to have been December 20th, which is the week before Christmas. So I know that often means a lot of folks are gone that particular week. And so that may not be the most advantageous time to hold the next ARC meeting. If we were to switch to odd number months, we could meet in November, and then odd number months going forward into 2023. Does anybody have any thoughts, objections, etc. to that? And if we do that, is the third Tuesday still work for everybody's calendars? Or is there another day of the week that might work better for the majority of folks? And just kind of throwing it out to ask what days might work best so that we can maximize our participation in the ARC meetings. Any thoughts? Nobody? Okay, well, if you think of anything, have any concerns, Jennifer, odd number works. Thank you. Kim, you're flexible. Appreciate that. Third Tuesday is best for Katie. I had a feeling that keeping the day of the week probably was the best bet. Thank you for the feedback. Okay. Well, sounds like we'll probably look at moving to the odd number months and then keeping it on the third Tuesday of those months. So as we finalize this, we'll certainly include it in the minutes, and we will also update the Swarm site. So for those of you that are not aware, here on the Swarm website, the upcoming ARC dates are posted here. So if we go ahead and make that change, we will update these accordingly when we send out the minutes for this meeting. So appreciate the feedback and the comments through the chat. Anybody else have anything last chance roundtable, or we'll go ahead and adjourn if not? All right. Yes. Go ahead.
I might have missed this, Gerald, but for the liquidated and delinquent account report annual training, on the sheet it was to be determined. Is that virtual slide deck that you put on there?
Yes. Yeah. For this year, it's the recorded version. For the 2023, the date is to be determined, and we will figure out for this time next year if we'll do it as a in-class virtual, but we'll hold a specific time frame and do it kind of like this meeting is, or whether or not we will just post it as another recorded version. We'll figure that out at that point in time for next year. This year's is just the recorded version that is on the website under the AR resources, L&D. There's the training.
So do we need to send you an email or just?
Yep, just email me saying, who and what date you completed watching that video.
Okay.
That meets the requirement for the honor roll. And then, once you complete the reporting and you send us the certifications and your ARPMs and all that, then that'll complete your reporting requirements, but you can send me a separate email that says when you completed the training. Basically, as long as it's at or before the point that you make your LFO submission, that's the only piece that we're looking for. Thank you for the question. Anything else? Anybody? All right, well, we are adjourned, and the next meeting will be to be determined and posted in the minutes. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And please feel free to reach out with any questions that you may have as you get into your LFO reporting. We're happy to help. Thank you.